So it's lesson 3, part 3, and we've got a drop-down list that we can fill. So we're just going to add a little bit of Bootstrap formatting to our form as well. So I'm going to add the Bootstrap link into the head of the page, and then we can maybe style our button. If we go back and look at the buttons, we can find a button that we like. Maybe under here. So I'm going to go back to my code editor, and I'm going to go up to my select an item. We're going to add the same style sheet. You can copy and paste the link if you like from your items page. And our href. Again, we'll link to the minified version of the CSS. And right away, if I go back and refresh, we're going to notice like font changes and some other style changes. So if I reload, font's a little different. And if I style my button, I can pick one of the button classes. Well, for now, maybe we'll just use the primary button. It'll make it blue with white font. So I'll give it a class of BTN and BTN primary. That'll make my button blue and white. You can use any classes you like. You can skip the Bootstrap formatting entirely if you want. Totally up to you. So I've modified line 36. And now I get a blue button, white text. So I can pick an item from the list and click find. Pardon me, and we get a 404 because our form is now loading display dash item. This page doesn't exist. So this is the last page we want to build today. So again, to get the styling, we just added the link to Bootstrap in the header, and I added a couple classes to the button. So we want to build this display item page, and that page is going to use the ID from our option, and then we want to display the name and we want to display the quantity. So we are going to be querying the database again, but we're not going to be using fetch all. We are going to be using fetch because we only want to select whatever item the user we pick in the drop-down list. If we pick tofu, this page should display tofu, and it should display the corresponding quantity in the database. So we're going to go ahead and make one more page for today, then I will upload all the code to GitHub for you, and I will give you your lab. So I'm going to make a new PHP file called display item. I'll give it a title of grocery item. And so item put on a header. And you know what? I'm going to add Bootstrap onto this page as well. I could copy and paste the link, but I'll just add it manually. So all the pages are going to use the same style sheet. We'll build a shared header later on in the term, so we don't have to keep repeating this code, but we're going to do that a bit later. So I'm going to add on the section of PHP. So our user's going to pick an item in the drop-down list, and we want to display that record on this page. So what are the things we need to do in order to fetch the selected item and display it? How do we identify which item the user picked in the drop-down list? Right, we need to get the value. So the value's coming from our form, right? So what do we use to get that value? We did it last week when we saved an item. Right, here was our page for saving a new item. So what do we do on lines 10 and 11? How do we get the value from the form? What object contains the value? It'll be in the option, but it's going to be in our post array. And it's going to be called item, right? It's using the name of our select. So we're going to get the selected drop-down option from the post array. We're going to connect, set up the query, to select, I guess it should say, to retrieve the selected item. Execute the query and store the result. This time we're going to use fetch, which we talked about earlier. We've been using fetch all up till now because we've always been selecting lists. In this case, we're only selecting one. So this is everything we're going to do. So we've done some of this, and there's a few things here that are new. So the first thing we'll do, so our drop-down list, we called it item. But the value that we're using is the ID. So I'm going to create a variable called item ID. Probably to be more consistent, you know what? Maybe we should change. I should change this to be item ID as well on my form. Would be more consistent that way. Even though our dropdown shows the names, it actually stores as the values the item IDs. So that's maybe a better. So I'm going to rename on line 12 and 13. I'm going to call those things, all those item IDs, the name, the ID, and the label. When we're not consistent in how we name things, we get errors. So I'll then can refer to my dropdown as item ID. Our connection is going to be the exact same. I'll put in my credentials again. So how do we get only this one? You may not have done this yet in your database class. We don't want all the items. We only want the item that the user picked in the dropdown. So we need some sort of filter. So what do we need to, we need to modify our query a little bit so it doesn't get all the records in the table. It only gets the record that we want, that matches this ID. So how would we modify our query so that we only get one record? You may not have done this in your relational database class yet. Thank you, Jeremy. All right. So we're going to say, thanks, Ivan. So we're going to say where item ID equals, and we're going to use, like we did when we saved data, we're using a parameter here for safety. We're not injecting our variable directly to prevent against SQL injection. We're setting up a parameter or a placeholder to hold the ID. We're going to create a command variable the same way we've done on our other pages. And then we need to populate the parameter from our variable before we run the query. So we're going to bind our item ID parameter to our item ID variable, and we declare it as an integer parameter. So before we run the query, we're going to take our ID variable and fill the ID parameter here. And then we can call execute. So I guess I'll move that down into this section under this comment. So we're setting up the query here with our parameter, and we're populating it. And in this case, we're just going to call fetch because we're only getting one record back. We don't need to call fetch all. We don't need a list. We're only getting one item. And we don't need a loop to output it. We can just output the columns in our item directly. So maybe we'll put on, let's say, echo H2 So we'll just print out a couple of H2 tags, and we'll disconnect. So we're going to get the ID the user selected in the dropdown, connect to the database, create our query with our where clause, so we're filtering our list and setting up our parameter. We're connecting our connection and query together, filling our parameter with our variable, executing the query, and then we're getting back one record using fetch. And then we can display the name and quantity and disconnect. I'm just going to try all the code. I'll upload it in just a moment. We'll see if it works when I pick burger. Okay. Almost works, but not quite. Whoops. I think I need to refresh. There we go. So item details, burger and one. My heading tags are a little big. I could probably shrink them. I pick eggs. I get the name and quantity. Maybe my H2s are a little dramatic. Shrink those down to H5. That's better. So I'm going to upload all our code. I'm actually going to upload it to GitHub. It's going to take my password out, so I'm not publishing it for the world to see everywhere. And I'm just going to go over our lab, which is due next week. It's only one page, not a big deal. So bear with me for a second. I'm going to upload all the code and I'll show you where to get it. We'll go over Git in a couple more weeks. I think that would be best class. Actually, next week we're going to look at Git. We'll have a bit more time. So this is lesson 3. So the link to my GitHub page is on D2L for you. But I've uploaded all the code we've done in our LAMP food so far. It's all here. Here's the direct link to the repository, but you can get it just by going to my GitHub page, which is linked on D2L. So everything we did today, all the pages we've done so far, this weekend, last week, they're all here for your reference. So I just want to go over your lab. Okay, it's under assignments on D2L. Here's what you have to do. You're basically going to kind of do a different version of the items page that we did today. Oops, well, I took out my credential. So here's the page that we built, right? Simple table. So I want you to build a similar page, except it's going to kind of look like this. You're going to build a different table. You can use Bootstrap if you like. So here are the full instructions. You're going to connect to your database, like you've already done today. Connect to your database with the use command. You're going to build a table called relative. So you can copy this script, create table relatives. It's going to build a table with 4 columns, a relative ID, name, age, and occupation. You're then going to run an insert script. No, it's under assignment. It's lab 1, Megan. Should be here, lab 1. Should be visible. D2L tells me it's visible. the optional, yeah, so make sure you click assignments. Okay. So for each member of your nuclear family, so your parents and siblings, or your house or other household where you live, you can include grandparents and pets, you're going to run the insert command each time, one time for each person in your family. Okay? And you're going to replace name here, age here, and occupation here with the real data. So put in your family members' first name, age, and what they do. And if it could be retired or student or unemployed if they're not working, that's fine. Chance for me to get to know a little bit about your family. Okay? I've used kind of a fake family in the sample. This is the Gallagher family from the show Shameless. So you're going to run the insert command and put in your family members into your relatives table. You're then going to build a new PHP page called Lab1, and you're going to use a query to connect to the database, select all the relatives, and display them in a table that looks like this. So it should show their name, age, and occupation. So if there's 6 people in your family, there should be 6 rows in the table. And then you're going to upload your page to AWS. Everyone already knows how to upload it. You should create a folder there called COMP1006 and upload your page. So your URL will look something like this, and just replace username here with your AWS username. To submit your lab, I want you to upload the PHP file to D2L and also put in a comment or a note that gives me the link to the page on AWS. So I can check your code file, but I can also click your link and view your Lab1 in the browser from the AWS server. So this is due next Monday at 5 p.m., same as your quiz on selecting data. Okay, so you got 2 things due this week. Are there any questions about the lab? Okay, great, thanks, Sammy. I will upload the recordings to YouTube as soon as WebEx is done processing them. And all the code we've done today, it's already on GitHub. Again, please write your own code in the lab. Don't just take my items file and change the words and give it back to me. I will know my own coding style when I see it. The only way you're going to learn this stuff is to actually write the code yourself, but my files are there as a reference for you. But please don't just do a copy and paste and give me my own work back. That doesn't show me you're learning anything. If you do have questions, you can always come up after class, or when you're working on the lab, you can send me an email. I have office hours Thursday morning this week, and I have off, and I guess actually that's the only time before it's due on Monday. Okay, so you can book an appointment for Thursday or send me an email if you need help. That's all for today. Thanks for all your contributions and participation and attendance today. Hope you enjoyed the class, and I will see you next week. Thanks, everybody.